Kony, the leader of the mysteriously named Lord's Resistance Army, was the first person to be indicted by the International Criminal Court.
Being carried out by 100 US Special Operations troops deep in the jungles of Central Africa.
In a region ravaged by war and violence, one man has become synonymous with terror and brutality: Joseph Kony, Africa's most wanted warlord.
Anyone who didn't know Joseph Kony before this week certainly does now.
For years, he has waged a campaign of terror against innocent civilians, leaving death and destruction in his wake. And at the same time, he has proven elusive to the authorities, but his days on the run may be numbered as the hunt for him continues. Join us as we delve into the thrilling hunt for Africa's most elusive warlord, the Altar Boy. Although he is famously known as a warlord, Joseph Kony's life didn't start at the war front but at the altar. Born in an unknown month and date, but in the year 1961, Kony was dedicated to the altar the Catholic way. His parents, Louise Obol and Nora Oting, who were farmers in the village of Odek in northern Uganda, gave him the best they could afford, and also made sure he was committed to the family's religion. Although Kony is the youngest child of 6 children, he was different from his siblings, right from the time he could walk and talk. He enjoyed a good relationship with his siblings, but he was quick to retaliate in a dispute, and when confronted, he would often resort to physical violence. However, he still served as an altar boy during his youth, and surprisingly, he was fond of dancing. But everything changed when Kony was 15, as he dropped out of school to become a traditional healer. Being an Acholi, it was a common practice at the time, but in Kony's case, he took things to another level, eventually becoming a rebel leader. No, he didn't just wake up one morning to decide he was going to become a rebel leader. It was all courtesy of his relative Alice Lakwena, a spirit medium who led a rebel group known as the Holy Spirit Movement. But the group didn't go far in the pursuit of its goals, as the government troops quashed the group as it advanced on Kampala, the state capital. Through her influence, Kony joined another faction of the group, and by 1987, he was already proclaiming himself a prophet for the Acholi people and took charge of the Holy Spirit Movement group. This group's name was later changed to Lord's Resistance Army, known as LRA for short. Early in its operation, the LRA enjoyed the support from northern Uganda, but after the group exhausted its resources, it began to plunder the local population. Since then, LRA went from strength to strength and would soon become extremely powerful when it gained the backing of the Sudan government, which sought to retaliate against Kampala for its support of Sudanese rebels. Kony, armed with prophecies that he said he received from spirits who came to him in dreams, ordered the LRA to attack villages, murdering, raping, and mutilating in a campaign of intimidation that displaced some 2 million people. Children were abducted and brainwashed into becoming soldiers and slaves, as Kony convinced them that holy water made them bulletproof. And if any of them tried to escape, they were beaten to death by their peers on the order of their leader. On top of that, Kony reportedly took more than 50 of his female captives as wives. His reign of terror soon became seemingly unstoppable, and to the powerless, all that they could do was run to safety. By 1996, the government began setting up secure camps with children walking miles each night in hopes of avoiding abduction. Initially, the whole LRA movement started with the sole aim of ousting Yoweri Museveni, who became the president in 1986. However, the whole activity of the group became unclear, as it was not all about Museveni and the establishment of a new government based on the 10 Commandments. LRA's activity had started to become a big problem, which led to the International Criminal Court, ICC, issuing a warrant for Kony's arrest in October 2005. He was accused of human rights violations that included some 10,000 murders and the abduction and enslavement of more than 24,000 children. The action brought Kony and the LRA under international scrutiny, and Sudanese support for the rebels was soon withdrawn. Without support, the group could not do much. This led Kony to make his first peace offering in May 2006. However, the negotiations dragged annoyingly. Paradoxically, the ICC warrant proved to complicate the situation because the prospect of arrest made Kony less likely to come out of hiding. The Ugandan government sought to have the warrant suspended, but such a move was seen as potentially damaging to the integrity of the nascent court. 2 years of verbal wrangling led to a peace agreement that was finalized in April 2008. Kony refused to appear at a series of scheduled meetings to sign the document, demanding that the ICC suspend the warrants for him and other LRA leaders before he would sign the agreement. Meanwhile, by the end of 2006, Kony and the LRA had largely left Uganda and were now based in the neighboring countries of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Sudan. In November 2008, Uganda's neighbors warned Kony that failure to sign the document would result in a joint military offensive against the LRA. Kony, however, again failed to attend a scheduled meeting to sign the peace agreement, which led to the birth of Operation Lightning Thunder. The following month, Operation Lightning Thunder, a military offensive led by Ugandan troops with support from Congolese and southern Sudanese forces, was launched against LRA bases. Launching this operation all made sense to Kony, who intentionally didn't show up to sign the agreement, because all that he requested was for the warrant to be withdrawn as he was in fear for his life. Also, he didn't want to be tried by the International Criminal Court. For whatever reason, he gambled that the threats made by the Ugandan government were hollow. Thereafter, the UPDF came up with a military operation, but in the end, it failed to capture Kony, but instead increased attacks in the local region. From the start, the execution of the operation had its flaws. One criticism that has merit is the improper use of Ugandan special forces. There was poor execution on the field, as the Ugandan Air Force hit empty camps. It also appears that a contingency plan for reprisal attacks by the LRA was never considered by the UPDF in the first place. And to crown it all, the goals of the operation were not clearly defined. In the early days of this effort, it seemed that the goal was to separate Kony and the senior leadership from the rank and file. Then the goal became to keep the LRA out of the Central African Republic, CAR. At one point, there were reports of a skirmish between the LRA and the CAR army, and before the end of the operation, the goal seemed to be the eradication of the LRA. The reprisal attacks by the LRA were horrific in scope. Since Christmas Day, over 900 people, mostly in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, have been killed. Hundreds more were kidnapped, and hundreds of thousands were displaced. The reprisals caused new self-defense forces to be formed in Western Equateur province in Sudan, as the UN peacekeepers in the DRC were not able to prevent these reprisals by Kony and his followers. Another factor that limited the success of the operation was the time limit. A 90-day time limit was imposed on the Ugandan military in their effort to rein in the LRA. But this was clearly a game that the LRA was familiar with. The same was done by the Rwandan military in their effort to rein in the democratic forces for the liberation of Rwanda. So the LRA knew that if it could hold out for this length of time, then they probably would be able to regroup after a time. It soon appeared that they may have chosen this strategy as there were continuous reports or raids by the LRA. But in the end, did this operation help restore peace and tranquility? The answer is a capital no. But just when the LRA thought that they were having it soft, they only saw the intervention of the US government. In June 2006, Jendi Fraser, President George Bush's Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, told a crowd of journalists in Entebbe, Uganda, that the United States planned to bring about an end to the conflict by the end of the year. After yet another failed attempt at negotiating peace, the Bush administration began aiding the Ugandan military effort. In December 2008, it provided intelligence for a massive air and ground assault on LRA bases in Garamba. But poor coordination and planning once again hampered the Ugandan army, with Kony and most of his almost 800 fighters escaping unharmed. In retaliation for the strike, Kony ordered the killings of close to 1,000 Congolese civilians, whom he faulted for allowing the Ugandan army inside Congo. The terrorism continued into the early 2011, and by then, Kony and his fighters had walked hundreds of miles through dense and largely uninhabited forests to Kafia-Kingi, just south of Sudan's Darfur region. There, Kony established a new base of operations, sending small groups of fighters to poach elephants in Garamba so that their tusks could be exchanged for food and ammunition. Recall that it was already Obama's administration, and one of the biggest problems in front of him at the time was the LRA, and there was an election coming. Like previous administrations, the government turned to a small team of elite soldiers that they hoped could tackle the problem quietly, in a way that could minimize the overt American presence and keep costs down, which is the U.S. Army's psychological operations soldiers of its Special Operations Forces. Message by message, defection by defection, the operation built momentum. Every soldier who left Kony's organization provided data to fill in the organizational chart and help the U.S. troops. Soon, the group achieved a key victory: the defection of Michael Omono, Joseph Kony's personal radio telephone operator, RTO. As Kony's RTO, Omono knew essentially everything about what Kony said to anyone under his command, when he communicated with troops, and how. After Pathways to Peace tracked down Omono's mother, his daughter, and his uncle, the team convinced the family to help. But with everything, there was no news of Kony's apprehension. And in the most dramatic turn of events, the U.S. efforts to capture the Warlord were brought to an end, even when Kony was still on the loose. It was almost unbelievable when the news reported the withdrawal of the U.S. troops, because a lot had gone into it. Approximately 100 combat-ready U.S. troops have aided the effort since the U.S.-backed mission to capture Kony first began in 2011, at a cost to the U.S. of about $780 million. All of that just for the team to pull out of Camp Dongo, a remote outpost in the northwestern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo that was also once an area of operations for Kony's insurgency. According to Africa Command, which oversees American military operations on the continent, the U.S. forces involved in the counter-operation against the LRA had another assignment, transitioning to broader scope security and stability activities to ensure the success of U.S.'s African partners. However, the public won't stop asking questions, and one of them is the actual reason for the withdrawal. The first reason was a diminished LRA stating that African forces involved in the hunt had helped them reduce the number of LRA members from about 2,000 to less than 100. The report also stated that they were able to successfully capture LRA's top 5 leaders. The emphasis of the government was on the fact that the operation, although not achieving the ability to get to Kony himself, has essentially taken that group off the battlefield, and for years, they've really been reduced to irrelevance. Outside groups, however, have warned that with Kony free, the risk to the region remains. And the truth is, with Kony on the loose, the LRA will most likely pose a serious risk to civilians. However, in this battle, the LRA kept losing as they soon saw the surrender of Ongwen. Dominic Ongwen served as a key member of the LRA and constituted one of Kony's senior aides in the organization. He didn't become a member of the group of his own will. He was kidnapped as a child, and that way he had no choice but to become a soldier in the LRA if he didn't want to die. He then rose through the organization's hierarchy and became a key member. However, in January 2015, Ongwen surrendered himself to representatives of the CAR, which was a major blow to Kony's group. With Ongwen's surrender, the LRA was put in the most vulnerable position, making Kony the only one left as a leader of the group. Of the 5 LRA commanders charged by the ICC in 2004, only Kony remained at large at that time. With only a few hundred fighters remaining loyal to him, it was mistakenly thought that he would be unable to evade capture much longer, but that's not the case. In February 2021, Ongwen was convicted by the International Criminal Court of 61 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes. It seemed like that was the end, at least, of LRA with Kony. At large, unknown to everyone, Russia was gearing up behind the scenes and would soon launch WAGNER Group. In case you haven't heard of this group, it is a Russian mercenary group that has conducted military operations around the world on behalf of the Russian government. Although private military companies are illegal in Russia, extensive ties between Wagner and Russian military and intelligence structures have long been assumed. And in June 2023, the links were confirmed by Russian President Vladimir Putin when he stated that the maintenance of the entire Wagner group was fully provided for by the state. Wagner isn't new in the game. Its first known operations took place during the Russian proxy war in Ukraine's Donbass region in 2014. Putin implausibly denied that Russian troops were fighting in Ukraine, with the official Russian government taking the position that Ukrainian separatist militias were battling Ukrainian government forces. The use of Wagner fighters allowed the Kremlin to support that narrative. At the end of the battle, the bodies of dozens of Wagner mercenaries were identified at Luhansk airport, and it was believed that Wagner was responsible for the downing of a Ukrainian transport plane that killed 49 people. Also, during the most active phase of the war in the Donbass between 2014 and 2015, Ukrainian security services identified nearly 1,600 Wagner mercenaries fighting as Russian proxies. This same group has been deployed to capture Joseph Kony in his hideout. While the Wagner operation in pursuit of Kony was not widely known, a rebel group whose members witnessed portions of an attack and its aftermath near a village in eastern Central African Republic gave the detailed account to reporters. According to the members of the rebel group UPC, or Union for Peace in Central Africa, at least 4 people were killed, including 2 civilians and 2 Wagner, and most importantly, Kony was still alive and well in the area. The operation began when 14 defectors from the LRA surrendered to a group of men posing as Central African Republic government forces. The men were a Chadian armed group affiliated with Wagner, which often partners with local militias to support its operations. According to the report, only days after taking the defectors into custody, Wagner forces attacked the village of Yemen, where Kony had recently been, and which is the site of a large marijuana plantation that funds an array of regional militant groups. Locals have also reported that Kony's camp was within 10 miles of the village. Although an arms and drugs bazaar hidden in the bush as a haven for poachers and smugglers was mythical, the authorities believed that it made sense for Kony to stay close to it. According to the locals, as soon as the supposed camp was attacked, a firefight ensued and killed between 2 to 8 people. Those accounts broadly match those provided to the reporters separately by both UPC rebels and a US source. Kony was not among the fallen and is believed to have escaped during or prior to the WAGNER attack. Some believe that it is possible they weren't that close to catching him, that Kony fled beforehand. Initial reports indicated Kony fled towards Sudan in the company of 71 fighters, excluding the women and children, and that he likely decided to change locations soon after the defection of the LRA group members, something Kony was known for. At least it's not the first time Kony would disappear into the bush when his pursuers get too close. But what happens if WAGNER catches or kills Joseph Kony? The consequences of victory. If WAGNER gets the victory over Kony, the consequences could be significant and far-reaching. WAGNER's success in arresting or neutralizing Kony would be viewed as a big blow to the United States and other Western nations' attempts to combat the rebel group. Since capturing Kony has long been the target of the US military operations, and they failed, if WAGNER was able to pull it off easily or pull it off at all, it would be humiliating for the US military power and influence in the region. Furthermore, WAGNER's success in the capture of Kony is likely to boost the WAGNER group's reputation and influence in Africa. To African nations, it would mean that there is a viable alternative to Western military action in resolving security threats. Also, it would further boost the demand for WAGNER's services among African governments to tackle insurgencies, further consolidating Russia's footprint in the region and potentially reducing the influence of Western powers. Kony's capture could also mean more collaboration with Russia as a whole in addressing security concerns. Moreover, WAGNER's victory may rekindle discussions about the role of private military contractors in crisis zones. Unfortunately, WAGNER has been unable to catch Kony, which has raised a lot of questions such as, is he alive? Is he still active? And most importantly, where is Kony? The first thing to know is that Joseph Kony is alive. This is not a speculation but a claim of Michel Mboli-Foucault, a former child soldier in the Lord's Resistance Army. According to him, Kony currently lives in the Sudanese region of Darfur and continues to give orders to his fighters. Michael told reporters that he saw Kony with his own eyes and that he was alive and active. Numerous former child soldiers have come out to say what they know about Kony's activities and his whereabouts, and most of them have confirmed what Michel said. In addition, other former child soldiers who have fled in recent weeks to the city of Obo, in the east of the Kar, have confirmed that Kony is in Darfur, in western Sudan. Even though there have been rumors that he is no longer alive, it has been confirmed that he is, just that he has been invisible. While this may be informative to us, the testimony of the former child soldiers could now provide new clues that could lead to the capture of Africa's most brutal war criminal. More of the fighters can still be found, as the LRA fighters are tired and unmotivated. The fighters are leaving the camp because they are no longer motivated to fight or do any harm. Most of them want to live a normal life. Observers now estimate the number of fighters in the ranks of the LRA at less than 1,000. Many of them have said that they want to surrender and lead a normal life. But in the midst of that, there were rumors in Bangui that Joseph Kony himself had promised a ceasefire. In return, he sought to be involved in a possible peace process. In addition, he also wanted to take on Central African citizenship. However, the implementation of the ceasefire has been delayed. The mistrust remains high, particularly in the southeast of the Kar, where people have suffered from attacks, looting, and kidnappings. For this reason, no armed fighters have arrived in Obo so far, except for the underage former child soldiers. One of the refugee child soldiers, 17-year-old Justin Aristide Nico, called on all LRA fighters to come to Obo and lay down their arms, as he said it is possible to survive without raiding villages or robbing and kidnapping people. He urged others to come to cultivate the land and grow sesame, potatoes, and peanuts. But there's an 800-pound elephant in the room. Many of the locals have remained skeptical and don't believe in the possibility of living next door to the perpetrators of massacres and crimes. Just imagine waking up to the faces of those who inflicted harm on the residents, killing, abducting, and terrorizing them all together. Maurice Mbasilimok, head of the Samwanjia village just outside Obo, said, "We cannot forget all the violence inflicted on us by these beasts." He recalled how in 2008, LRA men attacked their village, captured men, murdered and tortured, and abducted many of their children. Now it seems the whole community is stuck between rebels wanting to surrender and live like normal humans again, and the locals being unable to live with the monsters that took everything from them. The truth is, no one would be happy to accommodate people who caused them great grief and sorrow. But will this ever have an end at this rate? What do you think about Joseph Kony? Do you think he will ever surrender? Or will he remain Africa's elusive warlord for the rest of his life? Share your thoughts with us. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.